Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 4 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Employee decided to embrace malicious compliance by switching companies, leaving the old one without their only compaction technician, and getting paid more for less work. The second story. Company's policy backfired. When an operational disaster occurred, costing 6 figures and damaging their reputation. The third story. Employee was asked to leave for trespassing on private property by a manager who mistook them for an intruder, resulting in an unexpected day off. Today's first story is: leaving your only compaction tech at the yard is probably a bad idea. This happened in 2012. I was working construction for a smaller company. Specifically, I was hired as a compaction technician. Essentially, I would use Troxler compaction gauges to see if the roadway was properly compacted. But that was a limited part of my work. To test compaction, you would use a pin, guide, and sledgehammer to punch a hole in the lift, and then use the gauge to measure compaction. I started out with 2 other techs, which was the survey helper and then the site supervisor's daughter. Of course, she didn't have to do the manual labor part of the job. Since the start of roadwork season involved lots of demolition work, I was assigned flag duty, essentially 12 hours of holding a slow/stop sign. As the season progressed, I was put on culvert installation, doing both my compaction work and normal labor, essentially 2 jobs. Of course, this was a huge pain since I was expected to test compaction, then do normal labor, while also writing detailed reports. On the 3rd job site, I was placed about an hour and 15 minutes from where I lived. You got 2 options: either live in the cabin the company rented, or commute in daily. I chose to live out, but eventually they moved us to some SH portable on-sites. The portables had no bathrooms, no running water, no power, and no real amenities. I ended up staying in them for about 2 days before choosing the commute an option. Around this time, locals had been hired, part of the contract, and I found out they were getting paid about $2.50 more per hour than I was for the half the work. A normal day involved getting to the shop at 5:30 a.m., driving about 1:15, on-site by 6:45, working until 6 to 7 p.m., then 1:15 home. I was miserable, however I showed up at exactly the time I was supposed to. Here's where 3 different forms of malicious compliance started. First, I stopped doing labor while doing compaction reports. I would run tests, then sit down and spend 20 to 30 minutes doing reporting and math before having to run more tests. This peeved off a number of workers a significant amount, despite this being the core component of my job, and being the only person that could run the gauge. The second was showing up at 5:30 a.m. on the dot. I refused to be at the yard earlier, as I was already overworked and not sleeping. The final straw was showing up at 5:30 a.m., and the crew van, driven by an employee I despised, left, driving past myself and another coworker. I took a sip of my coffee, thought about it, and drove straight to the competition's shop. I sat there, hard hat, boots, vest, and lunch ready to go. They opened at 7 a.m., and I walked in the door saying what happened and that I needed work. I was on a site within 45 minutes, making $2 more per hour. That day I did not receive an apology, call, text, or anything. No offer of repayment of wages lost, etc. So the next day I was again with my new crew. My previous supervisor called me up questioning my absence around 11 a.m. I explained what had happened and why I wasn't there. He said he understood but expected me the following day. No apology, just yeah, that was an SH thing to do, and a bit of anger towards me. I told him to kick rocks as I was being paid more to do less work. Suffice to say, the old company wasn't very happy with me. But if your employee is willing to leave 2 workers, you underpay and demand I do 2 jobs, don't expect me to bend over backwards for you. Edit. It was seasonal work, near the end of the season. Unfortunately, they only hired and trained 3 compaction technicians. Me, the survey dude that was on the site I started at, and the super's daughter. Of course, she got preferential treatment, so wasn't forced to be a flagman at any of the sites. She destroyed an incredibly expensive Troxler compaction gauge, would vanish midday, etc. Then super at that called me, Mike, had a giant 5th wheel trailer, and made the company buy him a GMC 2500 top-of-the-line pickup to haul the trailer and be his work truck. But honestly, my new company wasn't any better. The only benefit was that the crew I worked with knew that they were getting screwed, and as such took every minute of union-mandated breaks, would do coffee and pizza runs, and just generally didn't care. We worked hard and got paid poorly, but I had way more freedom and was happier. I worked there for maybe 3 more months before I got a way better job. I understand what you mean. Your approach could be that when you found out that others were making more money, you should have demanded a pay equalization, and if they refused to support the idea, you should have considered finding another job. There's nothing wrong with demanding equal pay. They would have no reason to deny your request, and they would probably agree to your demands. Didn't your old boss ask you for a $2 raise? It's a good thing you left that place. You may have also expressed your appreciation to your coworker who went and got a raise. Your story is an example of how important it is to protect your rights and not allow yourself to be bullied. And if your employer does not appreciate you, then let them solve their own problems. You have won this battle and deserve to have a better job and better conditions. Bravo! The next story is, let's save $50 a month on a cell phone bill and risk causing 6 figures in operational damage, and damage our reputation with paying customers instead. First, I love working for this company. Honestly, I really do. It's a great company, great culture. This is just simply an example of bean counters looking to save $50 a month getting things so horribly wrong at times they cause 6 figures of lost productivity, and damage reputation with paying customers. Even after it happens, there's no change in policy. I joined a new company in January of this year before working for them as a consultant. During my onboarding, I had asked the hiring manager if I would be provided with a company cell phone, or be able to expense out my monthly cell phone bill. He looked into it and HR told him, this particular position is not eligible for a company cell phone, as it does not require after-hours support. This answer has actually made sense. I don't need to get involved in day-to-day operations support in my role. They also literally never called me once during my whole tenure as a consultant after hours. So great. I don't want to work after hours. Up until last week, that policy was upheld, just like it had been during my time as a consultant. There was never a "we were trying to reach you yesterday" when I logged in the next day or any emails asking for my help after hours. So I was loving it. I want to repeat, this is not a dig towards the company. They upheld their end of the bargain this whole time. But here's the MC part of this story. I have no cell phone number listed in my email signature, nor on my internal company profile. Because hey, I don't have a company cell phone. I have a desk phone, but that's it. I talk with a lot of IT vendors in my role and I don't need them calling my personal line. I also did not install Outlook on my personal phone or any company apps. So last week a major update was applied to one of the platforms that fall under my purview. The actual maintenance is performed by an operations manager and their team. Things went smooth in our QA test environment. I signed off, my boss signed off, so everything was ready and set and go. Major update goes in. Someone incorrectly performed a few steps, even though that same person performed them just fine in QA. Things started going wrong, horribly wrong. I was nowhere to be found. I wasn't responding to emails. I had no phone number listed anywhere, so they did the troubleshoot on their own. In hindsight, the fix was relatively simple, and I definitely would have been able to guide the team. The error wasn't even related to the update. They just went down a completely different path to resolve the issue, thinking the update was the root cause. It would have taken a few hours, but we would have fixed it. But in the moment as things were going wrong, in panic and trying to recover from the incorrectly performed steps, they somehow wiped the database. Somehow? Please do not ask me how. The backup was corrupted in this process as well, and they couldn't use it to recover. Dear God. They had to go pull tape backups, which is excruciatingly slow to recover from and a week old. Monday morning, I log into my laptop and I notice the holy hell that's going on. Oh crap. Get on a call with the operations manager. Operations manager is level-headed. No blame is thrown. Again, as I said, great company, great culture. Asks what happened to me. I told him I have no company phone. I asked for it and they said no. He just had to shake his head. Organizationally, he and I are at the same level. He just has a reporting structure and I do not. My boss and I got on a call for a debrief, and he asked the same question. I gave the same answer. No company phone. He's the one that told me my position was ineligible for a company phone, as I was not required for after-hours support. All told, it took the team 5 days to recover everything. Rerun all the transactions that were lost from the source systems. Another 1.5 days for the business teams to validate all was well and match up the numbers. My boss did ask me if I had a personal cell phone. I tell him no. I do, but it's the principle of the whole thing. As I said, I deal with a lot of external vendors now. I don't need them bothering me on my personal line. During business hours, we communicate over Teams, Zoom, WebEx, and my landline never gets used, as I'm barely in the office. He didn't question me further. So all in all, about 7 days of lost system access, productivity, operational reporting, inability to efficiently serve customers, inability to efficiently deploy frontline employees, etc., etc., etc. One of the business directors was still putting together the operational impact, but he figured it was easily 6 figures. All over $50 for a monthly cell phone bill for a bunch of corporate employees who they might need to call once in a blue moon. The funny part is a majority of IT is eligible for a cell phone because they're required for after-hours support. I estimate maybe 60 of us across all of IT aren't eligible due to our roles. Bean counters, gotta love them. That being said, I did give my personal number to the operations manager for future emergencies. At the end of the day, I don't want my team and friends to needlessly suffer if I can help. Typical work does not involve the use of a cell phone, and the concept of an emergency was not defined. But this was not a typical job. It was a project job. They did not consider the possibility of failure and did not ensure that all the necessary people were in touch. And even if this meant allocating a few temporary cell phones to key people who needed to be available, without requiring their personal cell phone and home numbers. If there is only one person in your company who can fix the problem without risking deletion of the database, then the company has much more serious problems than not having a personal phone. In any information technology-related business, there should not be one person who's the only wizard capable of solving the system, because the system may fail again, and perhaps the next time that person will be impossible to find for a week, a month, or will no longer work for the company at all. The third story is, oh, I'm on private property? I used to work for a supermarket chain, and quite often I'd be asked by management to work at other locations. Most of the time, this wasn't a big deal. I was happy to help out. It gave me an excuse to drive and have the petrol paid for. However, one day I was asked to work at a location very far away at a very early hour of the morning. I initially refused on the grounds that I would have to wake up at around 2 a.m. in order to have a shower, breakfast, and drive to be on site for 5 a.m. After some arm bending from management, I finally relented and begrudgingly agreed I would do it. Due to the drive not taking nearly as long as I initially expected, I arrived on location at about 4:30 a.m. I waited in my car with the music playing. At 4:50 a.m., I get a loud knock on the car window, nearly making me jump out of my skin. It was the manager for that store, who, never seeing me before, did not know who I was. The conversation went as follows. Manager, you need to leave. This is private property. Me, oh, but... Manager interrupting. I don't care. Go now. Me quickly realizing I can play this to my advantage. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I don't want any problems. Of course I'll go right away. Sorry. And as per his request, I drove home with a smile on my face, knowing that I have the rest of the day free to myself. A few hours later, I get a phone call. I answer the unrecognized number, and I recognize the voice immediately. It was the manager who told me to leave. Manager, hello, I'm looking for my name. Me, hi, yeah, that's me. Manager, this is manager name, calling from location. I was expecting you to work with me today. You should have been here for 5 a.m. Me trying to sound casual. Yeah, I was there waiting in my car. You told me to leave, remember? Manager, but you didn't say that. Me interrupting. There are no ifs or buts. I was on private property and was asked to leave. I was legally obliged to do so. Manager, right, but don't you think? Me interrupting. Doesn't matter what I thought. I was asked to leave private property. I'm not going to break the law and risk getting in trouble with the police. It was at this point he hung up on me. I expected to get in trouble for what had happened, but I never heard anything more about it. This was a few years back now, too. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. I hope you enjoyed it. Edit. To answer FAQ. I was paid for petrol money and travel time. I was not paid for the shift. It was originally going to be a day off anyway. I suffered no financial losses whatsoever as a result of this. My local manager never spoke about this, and I never mentioned it to him. I did not suffer any disciplinary action. Yes, I did have to wake up early and lose out on sleep. If you expect someone to come to help your store at 5 a.m. and someone's sitting in your parking lot in a car waiting at 4:50 a.m., and your first sentence is you have to leave, this is private property, well, he got what he deserved. I'm sure the reason the OP never heard anything is because in order to complain, the manager would have to admit how inappropriate he was. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.